Welcome back to Creative Thinkers. Again, my name is Miguel Valenzuela, and thank you for joining us. Today we have a special guest, as we always do, Dr. Fred Bugbee. He is the head of the music department at NMSU. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited because you are somebody that's a little bit different from what we normally have. We've had artists, we've had painters, sculptors, all different kinds of people. But today we're going to focus a little bit on music. So we always start off the show by talking about individuals and learning about them. So are you from El Paso?
No, I'm originally from Albuquerque.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in Albuquerque and then did my undergraduate degree at UNM and then went to New York. Got my master's at Eastman School of Music in New York, and then got a job in South Carolina. So I stayed out in South Carolina for about 5 years and then came back as a sabbatical replacement to UNM and found my way down to NMSU, New Mexico State in 1994 and have been there ever since.
Wow, it's been a while then.
Yeah.
Very cool. But when we talk to the guests here, we're always focusing on how you grew up as an individual, because there must be a reason why you ended up being a musician or head of the department. Were you one of those people that was playing pots and pans when you were young, or hitting the keys, the ivories?
Absolutely.
What did you do? How did you start out? Who were your influences?
Yeah, I know my mom was a pianist and tried to teach me piano, and I was always rebellious because I was rather, I'd rather pull her pots and pans out and make sounds with those. And so, yeah, I just loved the sounds that you could get from different percussive instruments from the time I can really remember. I enjoyed playing piano, and it was neat. We grew up with a piano around, and so that was great to play around on, but my love was always for
percussion
instruments. For percussion instruments in general. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we were talking about in the green room a little while ago was, at least as far as I'm concerned, I feel like when one drums, one has this kind of feeling of aggression in some way. Is that something that you kind of got your energy from when you started playing the drums? Probably. I'm sure that was part of it.
Right. I just always, again, loved the sounds, but I think the physical nature of
that's one
percussion
thing for sure.
is just a great thing. I think it's always been like, I feel like I don't have to go to the gym because
it's your workout, right?
Yeah, it is a lot of exercise to play. A lot of upper body motion. If you're playing drum set, a lot of full body motion. So.
And when you were younger, did you start out playing drums? Like, were you part of a band? Were you in band when you were younger?
Well, it's funny. Like, when I went to school, you could start music in the 4th grade. You could choose band or orchestra, and so I wanted to play in band, and so I wanted to play drums. That was what I wanted, and for some reason they wouldn't let you play drums until 5th grade. I think they had a lot of people that wanted to play percussion, and so
everybody wanted to get their aggression out, I guess.
Everybody was getting their aggression out, I guess. Yeah. So we took an aptitude test, and they suggested that I played the French horn, which was a brass instrument, and
which you had never played before.
No, I hadn't. But they kind of test you and see what your embouchure is like, and depending on and so that was the instrument that they recommended for me, and I was like, I really don't want to play the French horn. So my parents, my mom was a musician, and she said, well, if you'll promise you're going to practice, we'll just get you in private lessons for this year. We'll start
French
you
horn
off with
at school.
Yeah.
At home, drums.
Right. Well, no, I just didn't do the French horn because they could they had enough money to do one or the other, because they were going to have to rent the instruments and do the others. So no, I just did the drums and did it on my own, and then took some piano lessons with her, and that was it. So then I started band in 5th grade, but I was kind of ahead of everybody else because I'd been playing for a year. So at that point, where everybody that was else that was starting they were beginners.
That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah,
it's cool that you had the opportunity to be inspired by somebody like your mother, also. Yeah. But the fact that you had the ability to go out and play an instrument, because a lot of people don't think that they have that ability to be a musician. What is your take on that?
Well,
Because I feel that you must be very adamant about that.
No, I am very adamant about
tell
it.
us.
And I really think, you know, to be a musician is to be human.
In which way?
Well, I think all of us, you know, are innately musicians. I think, you know, as long as you have a pulse, there is that sense of rhythm within your body. It's something, it's part of who we are as humans. You know, if you look at other cultures, there's really not cultures that don't have music or don't have a sense of this organized sound. And a lot of other cultures also, there's no concept. We have such a, in the West, such an idea of, you know, thinking that to be a musician is to be a professional musician, or to, you know, and it's not about that. It's about the music itself, and we're all innately musical. Yeah, and you're right. I am very adamantly
connected to it in some way, right?
Yeah, no, I think we're all musicians.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that we spoke about earlier was the fact that you were saying that music is in everything, right? It's in who we are as individuals. I feel like that is the same in art. So I feel like we're all connected in some way. How do you view the world and the way that people perceive music and what they do with music? Is it different in different cultures? Because that's what you mentioned a second ago.
Yeah, you know, it's so, sometimes I think it's said that music is a universal language, which in a way it is. There are universal elements of music. There are things, there's rhythm, there's melody, but the way it's constructed is different. And in many cultures, you know, to get to know the music, you have to get to know the culture. And so if you just hear the music without any kind of a knowledge of what's going on, you won't really understand the significance of what they're doing. There's, you know, like in Ghana, there's this, it's a number of the languages are tonal languages. So depending on...
Is that where they like make popping noises or something like that?
That's Ethiopia, but no, in Ghana and Western Africa, but and in many regions in Africa, there is a tonal element of their language, and in a lot of Eastern Asian countries as well. But so depending on inflection, the meaning of the syntax is going to be completely different. Oh, wow. And so there's a culture of the Dagomba people have this, in the West we call them talking drums, and they're you know, kind of an hourglass shaped drum that have strings on it, and you can pull the strings or squeeze the strings, and the drum is going to go up or down in pitch. Oh, wow. But so you hear that, but actually what the Dagomba drummers are doing is they're mimicking the language. So when they're playing something on, and that's where it gets its name, talking drum, because they literally are mimicking the language. But even if you knew the language, if you somehow spoke Dagomba, it's still, it's all about metaphors too. So you would have to understand the language, then you would have to understand the metaphors of this, you know, 16th century ruler that they're talking about, or something, and then it has this whole meaning, because they're actually the historians of the people. They hold the stories of the people. But it's a crazy thing, because I can listen to it.
Language and music?
Well, no, I can listen to the music, and to me the music is interesting unto itself. And so I'm appreciating it on this level of Western ears. But when you start to unroll it and look at it at different levels, there's this meaning, and then there's this other meaning, and it carries this completely different connotation. And I think so much music around the world is that way. It's a very personal thing. You know, we have always held our music close.
I agree with
it's treasured.
that. Yeah, I agree with that, because, you know, I don't know very much about African cultures, but one culture that I could, you know, speak about would be Aboriginal culture and the didgeridoo. Yeah. Right? So I've heard that before. I don't know very much about it. I don't know what it says. I don't know what they're talking about. But I know it's very much their culture. Yes. Do Americans have something that's very much American culture as far as music is concerned?
Yes and no. I mean, I think or
Western culture, maybe not American.
Absolutely,
but
both.
Culture.
I think. You know, I think the cowboy song and the country kind of that came out of definite American. Well,
Life,
it is
I
an
think.
American life. Yeah, and
Yeah.
blues is the same. I mean, and why I say yes and no, blues obviously came from the African diaspora, and so it was this
Creole, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it came up in through. Yeah, well, I think both kind of different cultures hit at the same time, but yeah, it comes in through New Orleans and Memphis, and then Chicago. You have all these where slaves were either getting away from slavery but it hits, and it's so amazing, like that African diaspora. You hear these different sounds depending on how slave culture was treated by different ruling governments. Like the music in Cuba, the African diaspora was very different than the music that came into the English colonies, and that because they treated the you know, in American culture or the English colonies, the slaves were really discouraged from keeping any elements of their homeland. Of course they did, but you know, they weren't allowed to retain their languages. They weren't allowed. Whereas in the Spanish colonies, in the Caribbean, there were these organizations called cabildos that would kind of group different ethnicities together, and they could retain more of their cultural identity in those.
Wow.
So different approaches, and have very different. Then we have a completely different thing in Brazil, and we have all of these different. And one of the things I love, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but one of the things I love,
it's all about learning,
is looking at this. So you have this diaspora, and you have this melding of European and African cultures, and then that melding comes, you know, back to Europe, and it changes more, and then that melding goes back to Africa, and it changes more, because you get these different cultural takes on each thing, and so it's just kind of this never-ending thing that happens.
So it's all about growth, I think.
It is, I would agree.
Yeah, kind of growth, and like maintaining the ball turning and the wheel turning and all of that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the things that the audience wants to know is, when you started your education, formal education, was it a focus on music all the way, or were you ever thinking of doing anything different?
No, my idea was to be a musician. You know, I went in as a music performance major to my undergraduate degree. I kind of thought, you know, I really had been playing in some bands and doing different kinds of music. When I went in for formal training, I really started studying keyboard, like marimba, vibraphone. Started doing a lot of other things, was exposed to some composers that I hadn't been exposed to. John Cage, it's a famous American musician, Lou Harrison, who really, especially Cage.
Never heard of him.
Well, John Cage was just this fascinating figure that was revolutionary, and was essential in the development of percussion in the West. In the 1940s, he started composing these percussion ensembles.
Oh, wow.
For, you know, he would use like tin cans and use brake drums and use other elements.
This was in the 40s?
Yeah, really starting in the 30s. He had studied with some composers prior. Henry Cowell was a big influence on him, and Arnold Schoenberg was a 12-tone musician that came from Europe, that he studied with some, but really went his own way, and he was all about the emancipation of sound.
Yeah,
and
I love that, actually.
Yeah, and he was very much into Zen, and really became his music. He started composing pieces that were controlled through aleatoric means, and
what
so
does that
trying
mean?
to he was trying to get his own ego out of the composition, and so
really?
he would let kind of random events control how things took took place. Or he had many different things. We could talk about him all day. But
was he a jazz musician?
He was not at all.
He was not,
no,
really? Because
no.
I know that there's a progressive jazz where kind of anything goes.
Right, and that kind of came out of, Cage was very influential in all kinds of circles, and really that came out of a lot of his teachings. There were several different people that were doing things. Yeah, but
there is one guy that I know of personally. His name is Juan Garcia Esquivel. Have you ever heard of him?
Okay, I don't know him.
Okay, so you have to look that guy up.
Okay, I will.
But you have to look that guy up because my dad introduced me to him, and he was one of those individuals that took sounds from everywhere.
Yeah.
It was very non-traditional Mexican composer, beautifully done. But my question coming from him is, do you focus more on non-traditional ways of doing music when you lecture, when you talk about things, or do you focus on the more kind of Western way of doing music?
No, definitely on the non-traditional. And actually, it's funny, that's such a great question, but when I was, first introduced to John Cage, and then later the other guy I mentioned, Lou Harrison, Cage was really influenced by sounds from outside our culture. So that was one of the things. He was using all of these instruments. There was, coming into San Francisco, there were all these drums from Asia and all these other instruments, and then other places had all these drums and different things coming in from Africa and different instruments, and so, and then Latin America as well. And so he was really influenced by this and used those instruments a lot in his percussion ensembles, as opposed as well as tin cans and break drums and other things. But there's all these, drums that he's using, and so for me, that was kind of a gateway into world music and into music of other cultures. So I started, looking at these other instruments, and I was playing them in a very Western way because that's how they were being used. But I started wondering about how they fit into the actual culture where they were from and what they, what purpose they served and how they were used. And so that really got me fascinated with music from around the world and trying to see. And that's one of the things I love about what I do is there's absolutely no way I could ever stop growing because
I agree
it's
with
limitless.
I agree with that statement. So I teach art appreciation personally, and it's something that I absolutely love. You have taught music appreciation. What do you think the connection is between everybody's everyday life and music?
Wow. That's great. I think it impacts us on so many different levels. We were talking in the green room, I think educationally, just from a foundation, it's, you look at students that are in band and orchestra programs, and they just generally do better in school. I think that there's so many different reasons. I think music engages different hemispheres of your brain at the same time, and so
it stimulates your mind, right?
So you start to think, and it just helps things grow. I think there's also such a great community in those organizations that you go into, and you meet friends, and
they
you have
nurture you,
right?
right?
Absolutely. And so I think it begins then, but then I think that there's so many different aspects to it, and I think we are surrounded by music all the time. And Cage, one of the things that he really tried to impact in his music and in his philosophy is that we're surrounded by sound all the time. And that sound, we can choose to look at it as music, or we can choose to look at it as not music. But the more we can engage it as music, and the more we can look at that, we're living our life in beauty. We're participating in the art of life, because it's all around us. And so we can choose to be annoyed by it, or we can choose to think, wow, what a great sound, what an interesting thing that is.
So are you talking about things like the cicada?
Sure.
Right? Are you talking about things like the rutted pavement?
Yeah.
How do you think that affects us internally as individuals, or maybe mentally?
Yeah.
Like I might go down to my backyard. I might go out to my backyard and hear the cicada, and I'm like, gosh, these things, they make all this noise.
Right.
But then it kind of engulfs me.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's what's happening?
I absolutely, and I think that it's a very personal experience.
Yeah.
Because one day it might hit you one way, and one day it might hit you another way. But I think the more you can realize that it's just a part of life, and the more you can realize that that they're there, that sound is there, you won't be irritated, right? Because it's there whether you want it to be there or not, unless you get bug bombs out or something like that.
Right. And you know what's interesting, and I don't know if you've heard of this, there are some streets in some countries, I don't know exactly which ones, where they have little speed bumps, where if you drive down the street at 60 miles an hour, you'll hear part of the Fifth Symphony, for example.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
No,
and I
I've
saw
never
another
heard
one
of
the
that.
other day where, just everyday things like me driving down the road, or it raining one day and the water, trickling down, and somebody created these, what do you call them? The pipes where the water goes down through the side of the building when it rains. Gutters.
Yeah.
The gutters, so every time it hits a certain point, it makes a sound. So it's actually making music as it's coming down the side of the building. I find it fascinating that people are trying to incorporate things like music and art into people's everyday kind of environment, because there is a definite connection. Do you think it's important to inform people of those connections?
I do, and that's where I think,
Is that why you
art
teach?
Appreciation, teaching music appreciation. Absolutely. I think it's important that we know who we are, that we capture and have some sort of understanding of where we have come from as well. And I guess the why of some of these things, and realizing the importance. And absolutely, I think it's essential. And I think, general education courses like that give students a first taste of that, and hopefully will continue them on a life learning process.
Why is it important for one to get educated?
Wow.
Whether it be music or, nursing.
Absolutely. Again, to me, it's part of the human experience. It's part of continuing to grow and continuing to really get your mind involved in other things, and it's that lifelong learning that I think is so important, and it's not getting stagnant. It's not. It's not
part of growth, right?
Absolutely. And so, I think education is the symbol of that. That's how we can get away from that stagnation.
Yeah, which I think is very important. One of the things that I am very adamant about, obviously, because the show is called Creative Thinkers, is creativity and how that is connected to what we do every day. For you in music, how important is creativity?
Oh, it's essential. One of the things I love to do now, I do a lot of like silent film scores.
Oh wow!
And
so you take old silent films,
like
you
old
score
silent
them?
films, but they're actually kind of composed improvisations. I have an idea, and I usually do it with different faculty members. We do something every Halloween. We'll do one, and then we're doing a few more that throughout. But
so that's part of the creativity that you incorporate into what you do on a day-to-day basis in order to grow.
Yeah,
that is super cool.
And I love it. I think it's such a great mechanism, and it's a great way to make music with our friends and present something for the community. And it's also got a historical element to it as well. So,
well, what's interesting based on what we're just talking about is, when I cook, which I wasn't a big person that cooked ever in my life. As a matter of fact, I'd rather go out to eat than cook. But about 2 years ago, my girlfriend maybe 3 years ago, got me into cooking, and now I love cooking, right? But one of the things that I cannot be without is either having some background noise like a television show, but music.
Yeah.
When I have the music around, I feel much more energized. How does music affect people in that way? Because I feel it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think different people are impacted in different ways by that. And it's so like talking about like background. I think everybody, you know, you go to a party and you have some kind of music on, or you go to an event, it's going to be probably a different kind of music, maybe string quartet, but that expectation is that there is some kind of sound going on. And I think that we all, I think the silence sometimes becomes a little uncomfortable, and having something underneath is, you know, it's so funny though, different people have different strategies of studying and different, for me, when I love to have music on when I'm studying something else or when I'm doing something else, and it doesn't steal my focus, it actually helps me
I think
focus.
It enhances as well. A lot of people, not a lot, I have run into people that are like, I can't even turn music on, I'd rather have it silent.
Right.
For me, that doesn't work. I don't know if it's because of which side of the brain I'm thinking at the moment, but for me it's a catalyst for creating bigger and better things, you know, for doing more. So you are the head of the department at NMSU.
Yes.
It feels like that's a pretty high position already. What's in the future for you?
Well, I always want to keep my hand in the department, and I can't, like going to a higher administrative level, I don't think would be something that would be, I foresee. You know, we never know.
Your spoon in the pot, right?
And I still really, you know, my passion is still for working with students. You know, my teacher, my mentor that from Eastman taught until he was well in his 70s. I'm not sure exactly. And he's still, you know, he's in his late 80s. He still plays. He was in Europe a couple of years ago, and he's still, he's amazing. But you know, I was talking to him and before he retired, and I was like, how do you stay like so young? He said, you know, you teach, you work with young people, and it keeps you young.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's a great way for me. I love working with students. You know, I would hate to get away from that. Yeah, because to me, it's really about half of the love of what I do is working with students, and the other half is music. You know, and so then I put those two things together. I get to work with students on music, and you know, I mean, it's a pretty amazing career.
It absolutely is amazing. So if somebody wants to get into the music department or even get into music, what does one have to do? Really quickly, because we're running out of time.
Well, we have our website is music.nmsu.edu. I think that's the easiest way, and if you find it, there'll be lots of information of how to contact me or how to contact different people within the music department that you're interested in studying and with.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, you guys are all, I'm sure, very well educated and know your stuff. Well, Fred, I wanted to thank you for coming and joining us, because again, it's all about creativity, and now it's all about music.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun to get to talk and share a passion with you.
Yes, absolutely. It was my pleasure. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining us once again. Again, my name is Miguel Valenzuela, and please join us next time, because we always have wonderful guests to talk to. Thank you very much.